As someone with a general, very broad interest in astrology, i.e. not a great knowledge of astrology, just a really broad interest, one of the things that I find really helpful is the idea of cycles. So just as there are the different seasons, and different seasons evoke different processes within nature, astrological cycles also give us an indication of what kind of psychological processes might be going on for us and what might be difficult and what might be easy according to the overall pattern of things. Now, Jung was very interested in how astrology related to our psychological experience, and that was basically because he saw a connection. Statistically, he saw that there were coincidences, patterns associated with the stars, associated with psychological traits and experiences, the statistical correlations between patterns in the world and patterns in the stars. So that's my justification for using or referring to astrology in these videos about A Course in Miracles and healing, because I do believe in, from my own experience as well, and from an Eastern philosophical perspective, Chinese medicine, Eastern philosophy, patterns are the things that help us get an idea of what any specific ailment or symptom experience means, why it came about, the context of our lives and the greater scheme of things helps give meaning and understanding to our inner processes in any given moment. And with that understanding, it can help, say, rise us above the battleground, provide a bit of distance between the observer and the observed, so we can observe ourselves as an observer, as a scientist, if you like, somewhat detached, and how our inner experience is relating to the greater pattern of our lives and of the greater world. And from that understanding, we can know how to process and move forward. So this video is concerned with a current Venus retrograde. So this Venus retrograde period that we're in will last until early April. I'm not sure of the exact date. But let's have a bit of a discussion about what Venus is and the planet Venus, the kind of things that Venus is associated with. So desire, love, money, desire related to love, desire related to money, and connection. So that's a real positive aspect to Venus. Venus is about that part of ourselves that wants to connect with others. It doesn't necessarily mean that we connect physically, want to go to a party or something like that, but just really that inner connection to others, where we love to have a feeling that we're giving and receiving at the same time through a mutual appreciation. So I heard one of my favourite violinists, Hilary Hahn, talking about what it was like in the pandemic not to be able to perform live to anybody. And she said that it really gave her an appreciation for what she values most about her work. And it is those live performances where she can feel that connection to the audience, and it's that connection to the people that she really values. So that's the kind of thing associated with Venus. Now, what does retrograde mean when it comes to astrology? Retrograde refers to when a planet appears to go backwards in the sky. So the movement of the planets, whether it's going forward or backward, is determined in relation to the stars, what is perceived. And what happens is that Venus, or any other planet that was retrograde at the time, appears to start spinning slower or moving slower in its orbit. And so it appears to also start moving backwards in respect to the stars, but it's not actually doing that. It's an optical illusion. I don't understand it, but that's why it's called retrograde. And during this retrograde time of Venus or any other planet, retrograde is a time for pausing and reflecting. So in the ancient times, retrograde of a planet was a sacred pause. It was believed that the planet goes into the underworld during that time, and the underworld being the place where the shadow is, or all the things that we've repressed, the unconscious. And then the planet will return when it starts going forward again and no longer retrograde. All that stuff has been brought to the surface, dealt with, and then we can move forward. So here's a Freudian term associated with retrograde that I've stuck in here: the return of the repressed. So during retrograde times, the area of life associated with the planet that happens to be retrograde, so in this video we're talking about Venus, during that time, repressed issues associated with that area come up for clearing. And they can be very familiar issues, very painful issues, but it's that they come up because we're ready for them to be cleared. And also the pattern of things, the pattern of the greater context of our lives is supporting us to clear those things at this time. So if you are feeling that you have some issues come up around finances, money, around love, relationships, strong close personal relationships, relationships in the past, stuff coming up around those two major areas of your life at the moment, it's a good time for those things to come up and be cleared. The general context of your life is actually, and the stars, everything if you like, is supporting you to clear those things now so that you can move forward. And another thing associated with Venus and the whole need for connection and the issue of desire is self-love. And that brings up our self-concept. So everything that generates shame and guilt, past things associated with our self-concept of involving shame and guilt will come to the fore. And they might be things that we're very familiar with, and they're coming to the fore yet again, but this time they'll come to the fore with a bit of a punch. It might be an ex getting in contact with you. It might be, for some reason, a very old issue is brought to the fore, and it's time to deal with it at another level. But I would also say that because there's an eclipse coming up, a couple of eclipses coming up around mid-March and late into March as well, there's a lunar eclipse followed by a eclipse of the sun, that eclipses are times of endings and beginnings. And because we've got two coming in during the period of Venus retrograde, I would suggest that that is also no coincidence, and it's actually a really good time to process these past hurts and our self-concept, our poor self-concept associated with them, anything that makes us feel ashamed, guilty, less than. It's a very good time to actually put a full stop to that part of our script, to say enough, it's over, because the eclipses are also signifying that there is a time for important endings and new beginnings. So the kind of things that could be coming up at the moment relate to what I call falls. So just as the fall in the Bible, the fall from paradise was when Adam and Eve ate of the apple of the tree of knowledge and were cast out of Eden. So they were rejected, abandoned, and also punished, because they were now told by God that they were mortal and that they had to suffer and toil during their life and that they would die. So they would be punished. So punishment and abandonment, rejection, out you go, are things associated with the fall. And in our lives, early on, and then repeatedly probably in several different situations throughout our lives, we'll find instances of what I call falls. So the idea of a fall from paradise, or a fall from a life where you felt relatively free and easy. Like I think of the movie Citizen Kane, where it begins with the great Charles Kane, who's a successful businessman and a bit of a megalomaniac in that regard. But he's lying in bed, he's alone in his mansion, except for a servant or somebody who is around. Anyway, his relationships are all destroyed, fell apart. And anyway, he's alone in his mansion apart from a servant or someone there. And he's just miserable, dying. And his last words was, very last word was Rosebud. And then the rest of the film is people trying to find out, what did Rosebud mean? Was it a person? Was it a thing? And basically you find out at the end of the film that Rosebud was the name of a little sleigh that Charles had when he was a little boy, and it was what he used to play on in the snow. So it reflected a time of innocence, a time when he wasn't self-conscious. So in the sense of he was able to play spontaneously without fear, to express himself, to have that innocence of childhood. And so at the end of his life, he's like, after all the millions he's amassed, all the fame and fortune, all he really longed for was that time associated with Rosebud. So the fall for him was when his family discovered that there was oil on their property. They were a poor family, and in order to prepare him for his inheritance, his mum and father allowed him to be taken away by somebody who would prepare him for the business world. So that was the fall. That was the first fall in his life. And then the others just kept happening because he was trying to make up for that loss that he had in the very first fall. So why did as a child, his mother and father were like, yes, okay, you can send him away. How must he have felt about that? And then the fear also, being taken off by this stranger who was taking him to live somewhere else and educating for the business world. So that's what these falls are about, a sense of abandonment or rejection and retribution and punishment associated with a sense of loss. And something in our past will come up around that. And these very first falls then set in motion a way of perceiving our lives going forward, which fit in with the beliefs that we've established from that fall. That fall puts on a pair of blinkers early in life that kind of channels our vision so that we perceive things in a way that confirm the self-concept that we have, which will involve shame and guilt because we feel we've been abandoned, rejected, and also punished. So in the circumstance of Citizen Kane, as a little boy, you can imagine him thinking, what did I do? What did I do wrong that you're sending me away with this fellow? And no matter how much they would explain to him, it's for your own good, you're going to be rich and you need to know how to handle money. That means nothing to a child. So, it would have set in a certain way of perceiving, and I would suggest that it's that shame and guilt that provided the motivation and the compulsion of Citizen Kane to proceed as he did through the business world. His way degenerated into more and more narcissism. So to explain this idea of a fall and an early memory coming back to us sometimes during this Venus retrograde period, so that we can reassess things. Anyway, I'll read from this book, Above the Battleground, which is something that I wrote a while ago. And there's a section called Earliest Memories in Our Style of Life. So it gives detail to what I've just explained about in relation to a fall and putting blinkers on for the rest of our life. So the psychoanalyst Alfred Adler proposed that our first childhood memories unveil our style of life. That's what he called it. Regardless of their accuracy, the selection of these memories implies that they reflect the main themes that shape our life story. For example, a client of Adler remembered a family portrait being taken when she was 4. Her brother was given a ball to hold and was seated on the arm of a chair, while she was told to stand on the other side, empty-handed. This early memory, easily recalled, formed part of a series with similar themes around not being good enough. The client's style of life was driven by these themes. The events that stood out for her were those which confirmed a belief in her inferiority and rejection, compounding her behaviours associated with shame. That we live our life by stories which shape our thoughts, decisions, and behaviour is also the main principle of narrative therapy. People construct and are constructed by their childhood survival stories, which are reinforced throughout their lives. Our memories selectively emphasise experiences that align with our preconceived narratives, which also guide how we interpret our current experience. We don't take in everything that we see, only that which fits with our style of life. When we don't want to hold on to our narrative anymore, we're called to address our stories around shame and guilt. And being open to gaps in our life's narrative promotes healing. So I'd say this is a very good time in Venus retrograde at the moment, this whole month of March, to decide whether we want to hold on to those scripts, the way we have interpreted certain events from our childhood, anything related to a fall. This is a very good time to think, do I really want to hold on to the way I perceived that event, that person and myself? Or do I want to open my mind up to the fact that perhaps I could have perceived it differently, perhaps I am wrong about their motivations, and perhaps I am wrong about my value. So a little bit further on, I'll just read that line again. When we don't want to hold on to our narrative anymore, we're called to address our stories around shame and guilt, and being open to gaps in our life's narrative promotes healing. When we're ready to move on, we'll be assisted through fortuitous events, a book we find, a television program we come across, an overheard conversation. Anything can help us gain a greater perspective of our past and people's motivations. So again, if you focus on being open to healing and open to perceiving things differently during this Venus retrograde time, you will receive what you need to help you along in the process of healing and seeing people differently, and including yourself, seeing yourself differently as well. You only need to decide what you want, what you desire. Do you want to continue to feel the way you do about yourself and others, or do you want to have a good sense of connection? And the reason money, I think, comes in here is that money is always associated with power. And so if we have a low self-esteem, or what the world called low self-esteem, but everybody does, and when you're in your ego, you're identified with littleness, money becomes a real symbol of power. And so not having it can make you feel less than, and having it can make you feel better than, but either way, you're not feeling connected with others because you're setting yourself apart from others and you're making money more important than it is. So Venus and the whole issue of desire can say, what do we want? What do we want money for? What do we want to connect to people for? Do we want to connect with money and people to fulfill our defensive needs against littleness? Do we want to use them to feel better about ourselves? Or do we want to truly connect? And if we want to truly connect, like Hilary Hahn said about with her playing with the audience, playing the music, then if we want to truly connect, then healing our self-concept is the way to do it. And now is a great time to do it. Another thing that can happen when we are open to seeing things differently is that we might become spontaneously become aware or reflect on inconsistencies in our narrative. So in that story about how someone treated us, how they must have in our mind viewed us, perceived us, we can become aware, oh, but one day they were like this. It just spontaneously comes up. So I'll read a bit further from here. Yeah, we might even spontaneously recall inconsistencies in our narrative, so exceptions to the rule. Times when we did receive care, affection, or whatever we believe had been absent. This can help us gain a new perspective of others' behaviour feel some compassion for them and not take their treatment of us so personally. So the thing is this, I said before that Venus is all about desire. And whether or not we are willing to open our minds to perceiving somebody else differently, that is a matter of whether or not we want to let go of our ego. So there's a line in the course from a section called The Last Unanswered Question. And this line really points out that we don't want to open our minds to forgiveness if we want to hold on to our ego. So it says this: do I want to see what I denied because it is the truth? So in having our blinkers on, we would have had to deny all sorts of things about our lives and the greater context of what was going on in our earliest life, in our childhood, which is usually where the falls begin. We would have denied anything that was contrary to our ideas about ourselves and that other person's based on that original fall, in whatever form that form took. So evidence to the contrary, evidence that showed that someone did care for us, or evidence to show that someone wasn't always evil. If there is an exception where there was even a minute where somebody treated us as if we were valuable, then that should theoretically blow the lid off or kind of totally disrupt the idea that they didn't care for us. If in one moment they did, then a part of them was sane. So this sentence again, do I want to see what I denied because it is the truth? That's meaning, do I want to see my own innocence because it is the truth? But that also is, do I want to see somebody else's innocent because it is the truth? And the ego in us doesn't want to see it, because if we see the truth, then we'll no longer have the ego or cling to the ego. And the ego has told us that if we see the truth and we don't have an attachment to the ego anymore, which means we don't have an attachment to shame and guilt, that will be nothing, will be obliterated, there'll be nothing of us left. But as the Course says, you won't be hurled into oblivion as you let go of your ego. Your identification with the ego will be replaced with a growing identification with your whole spiritual self. So there isn't a need to feel that if I let go of the past, if I let go of my anger, angst, grievances, and also if I let go of my poor self-concept, then what am I left with? Well, you'll actually be left with everything, capital E, associated with your holy self. Whereas the ego is telling us you'll be left with nothing. So the section, the last unanswered question, goes on to say this: whom you attack, you cannot want to heal. So anybody that we blame for our distress, for our poor self-concept, for our love or money worries, anybody that we blame for that, we're attacking them. Blame is an attack. So, whom you attack, you cannot want to heal. And whom you would have healed must be the one you chose to be protected from attack. And what is this decision but the choice whether to see him through the body's eyes or let him be revealed to you through vision? How this decision leads to its effects is not your problem, but what you want to see must be your choice. So again, the emphasis is on what do you want? What do you want to see? What do you want to see? That must be your choice. And how it comes about is not your problem. So if you want to see people through the eyes of forgiveness and not through the body's eyes, then asking the Holy Spirit or Jesus for help to do that is what will lead you on your way. But you don't need to know how they do that, how they heal. And it, again, as I quoted when I was reading out from this book, when you have that desire, you will be supported through synchronicity, through things that happen to give you an idea or help let you know what someone's motivations might have been. These are the ways that the Holy Spirit's script can help us let go of the grievances associated with our self-concept and self-love. So the self that we want to love is the spiritual self, and we can't get there until we let go of the self-hate, and that's what this month is about. So I hope this does help you. There's a lot to be gained from a retrograde season, and this Venus retrograde will help you deal with those hurts and to move on with the coming eclipses around mid-March. We can go from what Virgo is associated with. So during the lunar eclipse, mid-March, the nodes, this is another term from astrology, I'm not going to explain it because I'm really bad at it, but the south node will be in Virgo, the north node will be in Pisces. What that is associated with is letting go of a need to be perfect and the self-critical nature, and move into the lovely spiritual essence of Pisces. Let go of the need to perfect this personality or the body or our self, our image to the world. Loosen up, lighten up about who you are as a person in the world, and in doing so, open yourself to who you are on that other plane, to the spiritual self that is light, that is above the battleground. And this is happening mid-March as Venus is retrograde. So self-love, how to come about it, heal this stuff. I could go on, but I think you've got the message, and I hope it's been of help to you. Thank you for watching, and tune in again.